Okay, so in this project we are going to look at creating a Magic 8-Ball, which is essentially an application that's going to ask the user do they want to use the Magic 8-Ball. If the user says yes, it will come back with a random phrase that we can edit ourselves later. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to clear out the sample code that comes with JDoodle. I'm going to change the name of this to Magic 8-Ball. It doesn't really matter if I change the name here, but just so that I know what I'm talking about, I'll do it. And then I'm going to start off by declaring a few variables now in a second. But before I do that, I want to set up my IDE so it works correctly for me. I'm going to turn on interactive mode so that the user can actually type in some input. I am going to click on this box here, which will put my code and my console side by side. I think it's just a little bit easier to read this way, and if I wanted to, I could increase the font size as well. So what I am going to do is I'm going to start by declaring some variables. And there's essentially three variables that we need in this program. We need an array, which I'll explain in a second, but that array is going to hold all of the phrases that can come back to the user. We'll need something to hold our user input. Whether they want to play again every time, they'll have to input that. And then we are going to need some sort of variable that randomizes what's pulled from the array each time. So I'm going to start with my array. I'm going to say string, I'm going to put in square brackets, and I'm going to call this magic. So an array is what we're creating here, specifically an array of strings. Most times when you look at a programming language, if you see square brackets, you're looking at an array. And an array is just a variable that holds multiple things. And what we're going to do is we're going to make our array hold four things. We're going to make it hold yes, we're going to make it hold no, not, today, and try again. So these are the four phrases that it's going to come back with. Now we can add as many or as few phrases as we want, but for testing purposes, having four here I think is a good idea. We just end that line with a semicolon. So this variable is now going to hold four different things. Now, the interesting things about arrays are, although there are four things in this array, and each of them has a position, in programming we generally start counting from 0. So the first thing is going to be at position 0. Second thing is going to be at position 1, the third thing is going to be at position 2, and the final thing here is going to be at position 3. Okay, so just something to be mindful of when you learn to program is that generally we start counting from 0, because that's how computers count. They count from 0 to 9, whereas humans generally count from 1 to 10. The next piece of data that I want to be able to store is the user input. And I'm going to ask for that as an integer. I'm going to ask the user to enter the number 1 if they want to go again, and the number 2 if they want to stop. So I'm going to use an integer for this. You could use a string as well. You could get them to enter yes or no, but it's generally easier as a beginner to deal with integers and numeric data, so that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to set an integer called user input, and I'm going to set it to be 1. I'm going to make sure that the user has at least one go before they are asked do they want another go. The last variable that I need is an integer called random selection. And this random selection is going to be a variable, an integer, so a number that is randomized. It's going to be a number between 0 and 3. And the reason it's going to be between 0 and 3 is we want to pick either the thing at position 0 or 1 or 2 or 3. So this random number is actually going to be the one that selects what phrase we print out. The next thing that we have to do is we need to import in our scanner. As we learned in one of the previous videos, scanner allows us to take input from a user. So we'll import java.util.scanner. We'll come down here and we will call our scanner in and clone it. Scanner keyboard creates the clone of our scanner equals new scanner with the system input allows the scanner to be able to use this black box here. So it'll allow us to type something in to the program. Again, this is more of a complex topic than we probably have time to address in this video, but essentially all you guys need to know for now is we are creating a copy of the scanner class. We're calling it keyboard. Scanner class allows us to take in user input, so we need it for this application. In the full course on the Certificate in Computing, you'd learn much more about this and exactly what every word means, but for this short course, we won't worry too much about it. So we have our three variables, our array of strings, our user input, and our random selection. And what we want to do is we want to make it so that this program is run multiple times. The user will be asked, do they want to go again and again and again? And anytime you have something that needs to repeat like that, you're going to need something called a loop. And a loop in Java allows for repetition. We're going to use a style of loop called a while loop. This is the syntax for it here. This is what it looks like. So while some condition is true, whatever in the curly brackets will happen. So what we're going to do is we are going to say while user input equals 1. So this condition basically says while the user input, which is this variable up here, equals is a little bit different from the single equals. It's called a comparative operator. And instead of here we assign 1 to the user input, here we check if 1 is in the user input. So two equal signs is all about checking what is on the left against what is on the right of the equal signs. So we're going to say while the user input is still 1, do whatever is in the brackets. So this is going to loop as many times as the user has inputted 1, or I suppose while the user has not inputted 2. And what we're going to put in this loop is our random selection. We're going to randomly select from this array. So as we mentioned, yes is going to be represented by 0, no is 1, not today is 2, and try again is 3. So the first thing that we need to do is generate a random number, which is pretty easy to do in Java. We just say random selection, which is the name of our variable. We defined that earlier. Equals, and we're going to assign something to it, math.random. And the math.random function is a function in Java that generates a number between 0 and 1. It's a number with a decimal point in it, so it'll be some random number between 0 and 1 with a decimal point. So 0.1, 0.5, 0.999, it'll be somewhere between 0 and 1. We want to generate a random number between 0 and 3. 0, 1, 2, 3. So the first thing that we do is we multiply this by 3. And what this will do is it'll give us a random number somewhere between 0 and 3, which you should be pretty happy with, but it still has a decimal point in it. The original number that this generates would be like 0.6 or 0.9 or something like that. So multiplying it by 3 will just still give us a number with a decimal point. So in order to fix that, we're going to wrap this up in brackets so that this all completes first. And then we'll run another set of brackets here that has the word int in it. And what this will do is it will chop off the decimal point and it'll store it inside random selection. So math.random, random number between 0 and 1, multiply that by 3, random number between 0 and 3, but it'll still have a decimal point, and that chops off the decimal point. Because we need whole numbers to move through our array. So we add our semicolon to end that line, and then we go down a line and we print out from the array. How do we print? Well, we do a system.out.println like this. That will print something. The name of our array is magic, so we're going to print from that. And if, for instance, I printed 3 here, what would happen is it would print the item in position 3 from the magic array, which is this one. So 0, 1, 2, 3. So it's going to print the item from position 3 in our magic array, but we don't want it to print try again every time. We want this part of it to be random. So we replace that with random selection, like so. That's kind of it for the moment. It's by no means finished. We're going to have to do a little bit of tidying up in a minute, but at the very least now what this will do is it will print out random items from our array until we tell it not to. So I'm going to click on execute and you'll see what happens. Okay, so it's picking out a lot of stuff. And the reason it's doing that is because we've accidentally created an infinite loop. You can see it's still executing away there. And eventually it just stopped itself. So we said while user input equals 1, keep printing. But we never actually gave the user an opportunity to update their input. And the other thing that you might notice is actually you never see it say try again. Not once has it said try again in here. And the reasoning for that we'll get to in a second as well. But first of all, let's update it so that the user can actually stop the loop if they want to. So we'll do another print statement, a system.out.println, and within this print statement we'll say go again, enter 1 for yes or 2 for no, as you can see there. So we'll print out a question to them, and then we need to allow them to actually enter something in to answer the question. So in order to do that, we'll say u input equals keyboard, which is the clone of our scanner class that lets us take in user input, dot next int. So that will ask the user to type in a number. So let's execute it again and see what happens this time. We still have to fix it so that it prints try again as well. So it's picked out no and it's asking us to go again. If I enter in yes, it goes again. If I enter in yes, it goes again. And if I enter in no, it will stop completely, which is what we want. But again, no try again here. So we need to come back and look at the maths behind this. So math.random generates a random number between 0 and 1. Let's say that number is 0.9. Multiplying 0.9 by 3 gives us 2.7. And turning 2.7 into an integer just chops off the 0.7 part and leaves us with 2. So actually with the code that we have here, we never actually hit 3. So we'll just update this to say 4, and that should fix things for us. Now we'll get a random number somewhere between 0 and 3, including 3. So we'll execute it one more time. And hopefully we can get try again this time. So we'll have a go. And there we go. Try again straight away. That was pretty lucky. So in summary, this application creates an array of strings. Yes, no, not today, and try again. An array is just a collection of items stored inside one variable. We have an integer representing the user input, and we have an integer representing the random number that we generate to represent the positions of these 4 elements in our array. Scanner keyboard, that just lets us take in input from the user, and then our while loop down here will run as many times as the user has inputted the number 1. I know I said that if they hit 2 over here it will stop, but actually if they put in anything that isn't 1 it will stop as well. Random selection variable takes a random number between 0 and 1, multiplies that by 4 to get a random number between 0 and 3. The int here chops off the decimal point, and then we store it inside random selection. We then print out a random selection from the magic array based on our randomly generated number, and we ask the user do they want to go again and allow them to input their answer. So you can take this and run with it. You can add your own elements to the array, whatever responses you wanted to come back with, and just be mindful if you're adding things to it, make sure that this number here matches however many items you have in your array, and then it should work pretty perfectly. So I hope you enjoyed this project. We do other programs like this and more, and we do them in much more detail on the full certificate program. So if you're interested, why not check out the link below this video for more details on the full program. Thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed.